I'm Helen Juffs. My pronouns are she, they, and I work as an end-of-life doula, complementary therapist, and I also work in health and social care infrastructure organisation. In 2016, two close friends died during this time, one of whom had a terminal diagnosis, but she ended up dying in A&E, and the other led quite an alternative life but had quite a religious family, and so we were prevented from sort of seeing her, and her funeral was, I just didn't recognise the person that they were talking about. I'd been signed off work and I didn't want to go back to being a surveyor. I couldn't imagine working in that environment anymore. And so I was just looking on the internet in the early hours of the morning, and this article came up about Living Well, Dying Well, end-of-life doula training. And I just thought, if only I'd known about that before, they could have had very different experiences. I wasn't really looking at it from a queer perspective at that point. It was only as I sort of got into advocating for people and volunteering at hospices that I realised, as in all other health scenarios, the needs of people from LGBTQI plus communities are just not met.
So I'm Ash, my pronouns are he, him. I've got various death-related hats. The first hat is I am the author of the Queer Funeral Guide, which is a little guide called Making Informed Choices When Planning a Funeral, a guide for queer people. I also co-founded the Queer Death Network with Jemima and Marsh.
So, hello, my name is Jemima. I use she, her pronouns, and I work as client support advisor at Poppy's Funerals, which is an independent funeral directors in southwest London.
Working in end-of-life care, what do you think are some of the most important areas that require improvement or attention?
When we think of kind of queer or perhaps, say for example, trans people in death care, an ally's reaction might be, oh, I'm nervous about the registration and getting the dates of death and the names correct. And when thinking about doing death care for that kind of community, really focus on all the ways in which they're different. And the amount of times I have arranged a funeral for somebody who is from the West Indies or from Jamaica, who, when the family have registered their death, they've suddenly found out about a name that person that they've never known. And so you have somebody, a matriarch dying in a family at the age of 90, and everyone at the funeral is going, I had no idea that was her actual name. We see trans people as having these other tricky elements that we need to figure out. Everyone is tricky. Everybody has these difficult elements. As a queer person working in death and end-of-life care, can you speak to any experiences of direct discrimination or microaggressions that you or someone you know might have experienced in those spaces?
With the Being Ready project, one of the things that we learned in a survey of the trans and gender diverse community was that there were many experiences of people having very poor quality care, but also direct discrimination and indirect discrimination. We heard about somebody whose mum was trans and was in end-of-life care and wasn't offered a bath or a shower for 2 weeks. We don't know if that was because of her trans identity, or if it was because they were very short-staffed, or there was just particularly poor care where they were. But there's lots and lots of instances of this happening that we read about.
I'm very open, and I try and get every opportunity I can to say, this is my wife, I have a wife, my wife might visit. But I've been warned by staff working in institutions, I wouldn't, maybe don't make a big deal out of that, or actually I've got a gay son but I don't tell people because I might be discriminated against. And that's such a weight, the worry that a relation of mine might be discriminated against because of me. And I know other people who just say, I'm not going to be out because it's just a level of complexity and emotional labour that I haven't got space for.
When I have put things out on social media asking other professionals about their experiences, like have they looked after queer people, would they want to be involved in the research that we were doing, or even putting info out there saying like we're delivering this training course, does anybody want to sign up to it? And just the responses of people saying, well, what's the difference? You don't do anything different for trans, we're all the same when we die, we're all just a bag of bones at the end. And the kind of ignorance mixed with sort of like a little bit of hostility. How dare I question that their care might not be 100% tip-top brilliant for everybody. How dare I question that they might treat trans people differently? And that kind of thing, it just proves that, you know, the training is needed, and it proves that changes need to be made, and we need people working in these areas, and we need queer people working in these areas in positions of power.
In the LGBTQI+, there's so much conflict as well. You know, we're not all one big happy band.
No.
You know, there's a lot of prejudice against different sectors. So, and I know people from that community, the last place they want to go to is a queer funeral director, because they don't want to be singled out and special and different. They want to feel, you know, they fit. I was born the year that male homosexuality was decriminalised. So there are a lot of people who were living during that time. And there's a huge amount of work to be done around what happens to queer people with dementia, because, you know, in their heads, they can be living in a time where they're illegal still, or, you know, they haven't come out.
There would be, you know, people who are trans who have dementia, and then their families are like, oh, this is an opportunity for us to pretend that you were never trans and try and detransition the person.
Every single time it comes down to individualised care.
And individualised care on a day-to-day basis, not individualised care. Or this person transition, so therefore they are now this.
Tick, done.
Tick, So
my feelings on truly queering death would be that things would happen more in the community. We would care for our people, you know, at home if we can, or in places that were set up for LGBTQ people and were truly safe and inclusive. But that does also mean that if you are an LGBTQ person who isn't connected to your community, then who's got you? Who's gonna catch you when you need that care?